On today's episode, I install another upgrade the internet told me I had to have. While I was at Blazer Bash and Full Size Invasion, I noticed that both the rear wheel seals started leaking on my full float 14-bolt rear end. And I decided if I'm going to be replacing wheel seals, I wanted to see if there was an upgrade or a better wheel seal available. I found one on the internet, and I figured since I was in there, I'm going to go ahead and replace the wheel bearings. Come along as I show you just how easy it is to replace the wheel bearings and seals.
The first step is to remove your wheel and tire. For me, I've done a disc brake conversion, so the first thing I need to remove is my caliper. Now remember, it's always a good idea to secure your caliper to something rather than let it hang from the brake line. Once you've got your brakes out of the way, remove the 8 axle flange bolts. Then grab something to pry the axle shaft out and remove it from the housing. This will get a little messy, so it's a good idea to have some kind of a catch pan underneath the axle shaft. With the axle shaft removed, take a flathead screwdriver and bend the tabs back on the lock washer. Once those tabs are bent back, take your axle nut socket and remove the outer axle nut. With the outer axle nut out of the way, it's time to remove the lock washer. You can see I kind of got hung up on the gasket a little bit here, so remember to take that gasket off as well. With the lock washer out of the way, it's time to remove the inner nut. With both nuts removed, it's time to remove the hub from the spindle. Now here's a trick that I've learned over the years. Once you've removed the hub, if you take an old wheel and tire, or maybe the one you just pulled off your vehicle, and you reattach the hub and you bolt it on, it'll give you something that you can use for leverage when you try pulling the seals and bearings out. This is something I've been doing for years, and it has been very, very helpful. Now I try to use a seal puller for this, and I was just getting nowhere, so I went and got creative and really just whack this out of there. With the old seal out of the way, I pulled the bearing and inspected it for wear or damage. I was curious just how bad these were, and to be honest, they didn't look that bad. Next, I took a punch and a hammer and I drove the race out of the back of the hub. With the race out of the way, I need to remove this big snap ring. Now there's a trick to getting the snap ring out, and that's take a punch and actually tap it down to remove some of the pressure that's on that. With the pressure removed, I use some snap ring pliers to remove the snap ring. Now I flip the hub over so I can start working on the outer bearing and race. To get this outer race out, what you need to do is find a punch that will fit down inside these little grooves on the outside of the hub, and then gently tap those down, going back and forth in a nice even fashion until you get it out. And again, since I'm here, I'm going to take a look at that bearing and race and just see what condition it was in. For me, this outer bearing actually was a little bit more worn out, so it was probably time to replace this one. Next, it's time to clean the hub. You can see here I'm using just a little bit of brake cleaner and some shop towels. Make sure we get all the contaminants and everything off this hub. Now that the hub's clean, it's time to take some gear oil and lubricate the inside surface of this so that we can slide these races in a little bit easier. I'll also take the bearing and the race and I'll coat them in gear oil. With everything lubricated, I'll drop the bearing in, and then I'll put the race down on top of it. I'm going to take my bearing and race driver and tap that race down into place. Now that the race is in place, it's time to put the big snap ring back in. What I like to do is take a screwdriver and tap the race back down a little bit to add a little bit of pressure on that snap ring so this is sitting flush up against that. Next, what I like to do is take the old race and tap the new race down into place. Then I'll use my race driver to get the rest of the way in. Now I'll lube up the new bearing and drop that into place. Now I'll clean the back of the hub so that the seal has a nice clean surface to mount to. Now we'll install the new seal. This is the part of the installation that I consider an upgrade. This is a two-part seal rather than a one-part seal like the original. The inner ring slides over the seal surface on the spindle and seals it. There are no moving parts against the spindle. The seal surface is integrated into the seal, so it doesn't matter what shape your spindle's in. This is a really great design and it lasts for a really long time. With the seal started, I'll grab something flat and I'll tap the seal in place. Make sure to make it go in as even and flat as possible. You don't want this to warp or twist at all. Now that we've got everything wrapped up on the hub, it's time to clean the spindle and lube it. With the spindle ready to go, I install the hub. What I like to do is push it on as tight as I can by hand. Then I'll take the spindle nut and I'll screw it on by hand as tight as I can get it. Then I'll use a rubber mallet and tap it on the rest of the way. Now it's time to tighten, then torque down this first spindle nut. This one you torque to 50 foot-pounds. Check, make sure everything's spinning well. Check the torque one more time. Once everything's good to go there, you'll back it off about a quarter turn. Next, you'll torque it down again to 35 foot-pounds. Then you'll back it back off a quarter turn. Now you reinstall the lock washer and the outer spindle nut. The internet has all kinds of torque ratings for this. For me, I like to do 65 foot-pounds, call it good. With that torque down, take a screwdriver and bend some of those tabs down on that lock washer. Next, you need to clean the hub surface really good because we're going to be using some RTV. Also remember to clean the back of the axle shaft. Now apply RTV to the back of the gasket. Then slide the gasket down the axle shaft and apply RTV to the back of the gasket.
Sorry, I was like, what is he trying to do?
Now, reinstall the axle shaft. Once you get it in place, you can use a screwdriver to help line up the gasket and all the holes. Then install the 8 flange bolts. With those flange bolts tightened down, it's time to reinstall my calipers. Now it's time to torque the flange bolts down. These get 115 foot-pounds. Once these are torqued, it's time to install your wheel and tire.
Okay, well that pretty much wraps it up. As you can see, replacing the wheel bearings and seals really wasn't that hard. I can tell from the upgraded design of the wheel seal that it's probably going to last quite a bit longer. So in my opinion, it does look like an upgrade. It looks like a way better design. So if you found this information useful at all, do us a favor and like and subscribe. I'm Joe, and this is You Into Garage.